Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I just got back from South Carolina where I spent 3 days going over a bunch of new products that Berkley and other companies within the Pure Fishing umbrella will be coming out with in 2026. Super exciting stuff, a lot of really cool new products, a lot of cool innovation. I think you guys will be impressed with a lot of the products that they'll be rolling out throughout next year. But one of the cool things that I want to talk about was the interaction amongst pros while we were there. I'm going to say there probably were probably 20 Berkley and Pure Fishing pros. And for the most part, a lot of the biggest names in the game were there, both in the walleye and the bass world. And it's always super cool to see those two worlds collide, being the walleye and bass pros, because there's a lot of good information that gets shared that can be utilized to catch both species as well as a lot of other game fish. But anytime you put a bunch of pros in the room that are picking apart baits, getting to test them in the tanks, getting to evaluate colors, getting to look at all of the new products and the nuances that go into those products, it's just a cool thing to see, because you get to see the wheels turning in all of these anglers' heads. You get to compare notes, you get to, walk through the things you like or dislike, and it's very interesting to see how oftentimes the pros are on the same page, but a lot of times they're also a little bit off on the things that they like. But really what I walked away with from seeing that is how it truly is the little things, the little nuances of baits that make them better than other baits or other similar techniques. And a lot of that just comes down to the user. There's always this idea that like the pros have products that the general public don't have, or that the pros have all of this information that other people don't have. And the reality is, I think a lot of reasons that the pro anglers are better than the average anglers because they evaluate every little tiny thing that goes into the bait they're using, the line they're using, the rod and reel setup that they're using. There's so many little nuances, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about like the main things that a lot of anglers look at that I think a lot of the average anglers take for granted. Today's video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app. This has had an amazing new update. As you guys know, I love the water clarity feature. As you can see right here, we're looking at Grand Lake, which just had a whole pile of rain come into it. It went from being really clear to having a lot of dirty water coming in the bottom end of it. Just an amazing feature to be able to determine where the clear water is versus the muddy water. So Deep Dive has just also introduced Stream Flow. Now this is a really cool feature that shows all of the water input coming into certain reservoirs and the amount of water coming in. So they measure it in cubic feet per second. You can see in this case, this is just a small creek, but then you can see the projected as well as the previous flows. If we move up the lake here, get into one of the larger rivers coming in, you can see here that we've got 490 cubic feet per second. And then it shows you that there's not much of a change expected. Now, if there's some rainfall coming, I'm sure those projections will change. If we scoot on over here to take a look at Kentucky Lake and Barkley Lake, much larger river systems, the Tennessee River, you can see what the projected outflow is going to be there, 28,000 cubic feet per second. Go check the Cumberland River here. We got 9.4 thousand cubic feet per second. Just an amazing feature that allows you to see all of the different water flows coming into the different parts of the lake. You can see which ones might be the most affected, which ones won't be affected, see what the projected outflow schedules are. A major feature to help you catch more fish. And that's on top of some of the other new features like the wind effects. Now, the wind effects is really cool because we've had wind effects as part of the app in the past, but all it did is show where the wind was hitting the shoreline the most, as you can see from the dots, the orange and bright red dots, which indicate where the wind is really striking. But now the wind feature also indicates what the wave action is like on the lake itself. So some of the features you're going to get from this is determining where to get from place to place safely by avoiding the heavy, rough water conditions. You'll be able to determine where you may have some of the strongest current flow and some of the places where you can fish to stay protected. Now, along with that, you still have some of my favorite features like the patterns that you've got on the lake that indicate the best baits and lures to fish with. You've also got the water inflow app, which shows you where a bunch of the rain input comes in. That can be an amazing pattern to fish throughout the year. Just a great feature to have. So many positive features anytime you're fishing or using the Deep Dive app. Just points you in the right direction to catch more fish. Whether you're a tournament angler or a local fun fisherman that's just out to catch a few fish, the Deep Dive app will help you catch more fish next time you're out on the water. So the first, and there's no particular order to these, but the first one is line choice. It's really interesting to see and listen to the pro anglers talk about the presentations that they make with certain lines. You know, they'll upgrade or downgrade, you know, a 2-pound difference in line. They'll go from a 10 to a 12 or a 17 to a 20 or a 6 to a 4 to get the right presentation. It's oftentimes I think most anglers just go, well, I've got 12-pound on my bait caster, that's what I'm using today. And it's a kind of a misconception, I think, that pros aren't changing spools out or using a lot of different line, because the reality is, like, the amount of different types of line that the pro anglers are using to get the presentation that they want. You know, they recognize how a certain line diameter will either help or hurt the bait presentation. It doesn't matter what technique it is. You're going to change the presentation of your bait based on the line type and the line size. So it was a common you know, theme throughout the entire couple of days that, you know, certain lines are better for this or that, and certain line size based on the depth that you're trying to fish, and blah, blah, blah. Like, it was really interesting to listen to how in-depth all the other anglers get. You know, I think a lot of times I feel like I overanalyze stuff, but when you get in a room with other professional anglers, it's like nothing is taken for granted. So line is one that I think is really underappreciated by the average angler. Another one is the hook, and it's everything from hook shape, hook type, hook diameter, hook strength. So many different features that go into a hook. You know, if you were to just talk about a jig head minnow, you're going to get a whole bunch of different answers from anglers as to what the right jig head is. But there's a lot of similar characteristics that the pro anglers are looking for within that jig head, to the point where they'll often change the jig head that they like the most, that gets them closest to what they want, but they'll alter it to still get to what it is that they're looking for. And with all of these, it's not necessarily a matter of one being right or wrong in terms of the product. It really just comes down to the angler getting the presentation that they want, meaning some may want a certain jig head for a certain situation. Another angler may say in that same situation they prefer a different type of action, so they're going to use a different head. The key here is both those anglers are so in tune with what they're doing that they can identify what it is within their arsenal that will make the bait do what it is that they want. Too many anglers out there just go, I'm going to use this today. And they don't recognize how they can change the action with minor changes. And the hook that you're using within whatever technique it is will have a drastic impact on that bait's presentation. The common theme here is presentation. All of this comes down to making the right presentation for that bait or that technique. And again, it's critical to understand that each angler has their own way that they think it needs to get done, but they know how to get to that outcome, if that makes sense. So your hook is a huge option. The other is the bait, the action of the bait. You know, we spent a lot of time around the tank looking at how baits were being worked and how you could make a bait do certain things based on rod tip action and reel handle turn. And it's always really nice to be able to see that in a tank, because you can be right up where that bait is eye level with you, and you can just see what that bait's action is. But you also can get a good understanding as to what that bait does that you don't like when you do certain things, so you can understand and manipulate that bait to do what it is that you want. The crazy thing is, you could pick up one bait, compare it to another bait that looks very similar, and they respond completely different. And it's the pro anglers are really good at figuring out what it is that one bait does that the other similar bait doesn't do, that they like or don't like, right? So being able to identify the action of the bait that you're using is very, very critical as well. Because the reality is, when you take all of these different little parts of the game, you know, your line choice, your hook choice, the action of the bait, you put that all together, if you can make the presentation that it is that you want, you're going to increase the number of bites drastically. That's really what it comes down to. Now, there is definitely some experience level to the anglers knowing, hey, if I can put all these puzzle pieces together to get this presentation, I'm going to get more bites. They know if they can get here that that's going to generate more strikes, but they know all these little nuances of all the different pieces of the puzzle that will help them get there. And that's really, I think, what separates so many of the high level anglers from the average anglers. Like, there's such a in-depth review of everything they're using and what they're doing with those products to get to that end result of the presentation that it is that they're looking for. It was just really neat to be able to see all the wheels turning of all these anglers. You know, color was another thing that it was interesting to see. You know, we got to see a lot of the new products coming, and it's like, you know, there were some products, some colors that were just like, some anglers were like, it's off just by a hair in their eyes for what they want. And it's like, I mean, when you look at it, it looked phenomenal, but it's like just a hue darker or a hue lighter. And it's like, that's how detailed a lot of anglers are when it comes to the baits that they're using. They want everything to be just perfect. And a lot of that is just, again, to get them to the final presentation that they're looking for, which is part of that is confidence. You know, if you're just confident in everything you're doing, you're going to fish better to begin with. And bait color is a part of that. Like, if that color is spot on for what you're looking for, you're gonna have more confidence. But it was really cool to interact with a lot of old friends. Got to meet some new anglers that I haven't met before. Just a really cool experience anytime you get a lot of people together in a room. It's like one big think tank where it's just, you can feel the brain power trying to figure out how to catch a bass. Anyways, I hope this was somewhat interesting. If it was, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.